Video 2 for the day, Miscellaneous AP Essays number 4. Title your paper that way. Okay, done this. All right, another favorite senior picture, water polo team captain on the right. Both of them great swimmers, both of them great water polo players. Didn't know about the one on the right being a good water polo player till this year, but been a good swimmer for 4 years. Moving on. All right, little review here of the Phillips curve. Anyway, go ahead and draw this in your paper. It doesn't have to be pretty in your notes. But remember, if there's a change in demand, it's a movement along the SRPC, okay? And if you're moving towards more inflation, wherever your original point is, you go that way. If you're moving towards more employment, whatever your starting point is, you go in this direction, okay? Now, and remember, recession's over here. It's the opposite of the ADSRAS graph. Recession's on the right of the straight line. Inflationary gap is on the left, which is opposite ADSRAS. The way I remember it, as I've told you 100 times already this year, is I know recessions always have low unemployment. So I just know if unemployment's over here, then in a recession, we're going to have to be over here somewhere. For an inflationary gap, you're going to have high inflation. We're over here somewhere. Okay, now, so a change in AD is a movement along this line. A change in SRAS causes this whole line to shift out or shift in. That's key to remember. I don't know how I'm going to put that on your study guide, but I will. So a decrease in supply is a lose-lose. You wind up getting high inflation and high unemployment. It's called stagflation. And so this entire line is going to shift to the right. A increase in supply is a win-win. Everything gets better. And so your seesaw here jumps inward. Okay. For instance, if price of oil, everything else stayed the same, the price of oil did what it's doing today, it dropped. This would shift in. You'd have low inflation and low unemployment. Okay, so that's just a little review before we go on and we do our next problem. Okay, so here we go. 2013, number 3. Make sure you're putting these there at the top. So go ahead and pause it, set this thing up, leave room, 3A, B, C, D, and make sure you have the I and the II. Go ahead, and then the E down there, go ahead and set this up so you can fill in the blanks. And I would like for you, if you're brave enough, to go ahead and try this. Doesn't hurt, go ahead and try it. And if I see on your notes that you did it, then you crossed it out and corrected it, good. Good, good, good. This is a learning experience. All right, so pause the video and try it. Okay, we're back. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the short run Phillips curve. So we just did an example. Go ahead and draw that. They're not asking for the LRAS. Okay, very interesting. I'm sorry, they're not asking for the LRPC. And I think we're going to see why here we get to the second one. All right, so B, use your graph, show the effect of an increase in the expected rate of inflation. Now this is a head scratcher because if you think inflation is going to go up, you're going to spend less money. That is an AD shift. AD drops inward. But think about the supply line, which is always more complicated. If inflation is about to go up, they're going to realize that they're about to have to pay their employees more, and they're going to have to charge more for their products. So that is a reduction in supply, which is a shift to the left. Which of these is the most important? I'm going to say the supply shift. And notice they don't have you draw on the LRAS because I think they know how complicated this is. So let's just look at the supply section, the supply part of this. A reduction in supply shifts the entire thing outward. Okay. On the ADSRAS, it shifts it up to the left. But on the Phillips curve, it is going to shift the entire SRPC out to the right. So let's do that. Okay. C. What is the effect of the increase in the expected rate of inflation on the long run Phillips curve? I can't think of any examples offhand of where the long run Phillips curve ever changes. I know there's one example I can think of where LRAS would change, but we're not on that graph anyway. So I'm going to say no. Just because people think inflation is going to go up does not affect what the economy could do. Okay, C. Now, given the increase in the expected rate of inflation, all right, so inflation is going up. If you're a bank and you're making loans, and remember, you're going to give people cold hard cash and they're going to be paying you back. and you want to make sure you're not only making your money, but you're taking up for inflation. So let's say you thought, wanted to make 10% on your money, and you think inflation is going to be 3%. You're going to charge people 13%. That's the nominal interest rate. Now what happens is interest rates are, you hear that inflation is going to go up. What are you going to do? You're going to raise the interest rate at your bank. So for DI, will the nominal interest rate on new loans increase, decrease, or remain unchanged? They're going to increase. And thank the good Lord, they don't ask you to explain that. Now, will the real interest on new loans increase, decrease, or remain unchanged? Whatever it was the bank was trying to make on those loans is still the same. So that's the real interest rate. That is not going to change. Now, assume the nominal interest rate is 8%. Remember, that's what the bank's charging. Borrowers and lenders expect the rate of inflation to be 3%. Okay, and the growth rate of real GDP is 4%. Now, this is interesting here. They threw some bogus information out here. The GDP growth rate has nothing to do with what banks charge on their interest. So the deal is the nominal interest rate is 8%. Borrowers and lenders expect the rate of inflation to be 3%. The real interest rate is 8 minus 3 equals 5%. All right, moving on to the next problem. Going over the answers. Make sure we did it right. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. You can pause it and make sure I didn't mess up when I explained anything. I want you to pay special attention to how they're wording it, because I have the old Russellism redneck method of explaining stuff, which might get you in trouble. Okay, moving on to the next problem. All right, so on your paper, just go ahead and write this, and let's just talk about what this means. This is the ADSRAS graph, and let's talk about this. Anytime this point goes over here, real GDP has gone up. Now, if it was to go straight over here, GDP would go up, inflation would stay unchanged. If it was to go up here, GDP would go up and inflation would go up. So let's just cut to the chase here. If it goes to the right, real GDP is going up. If it goes up, inflation is going up, our price level is going up. If it goes down, price level is going down. If it shifts in, GDP is going down. Remember, GDP is synonymous with employment, not unemployment, but employment. All right, so we're going to do this next one, which is really short and easy. Boy, do I wish they give you a problem this easy. All right, put the title here and pause the video and try it yourself. Okay, now we're back. It says here that you don't even have to draw the graph. If there's an increase in the price of crude oil, all right, oil is what they call an input. It is a major input, and we've talked about this. If the price of oil, now this is before the coronavirus, in a normal situation, if the price of oil went up, it says here an important natural resource, that is, it affects everybody, but it's primarily a supply shift. And supply would shift to the left, which is a decrease, and it is a lose-lose. Inflation goes up and unemployment goes up, but that's not what they're asking you about. They're asking about real GDP. Real GDP would go down, and the price level of an open, okay. What happens to real GDP? It goes down. What happens to price level? It goes up. Okay, moving on to B. A technological change that increases the productivity of labor, especially because they use the word labor there. This is a supply thing. That is an increase in supply, which is a shift of the SRAS curve to the right. So that is a win-win. That is an increase in real GDP and a decrease in price level. C, an increase in spending by consumers. That means the aggregate demand curve is going to shift to the right. That means real GDP is going to go up and the price level is going to go up. We're going to skip D because D refers to Forex, which is not a graph we're doing this year. Let's go to the next slide and see if we did these right. And I'm in a bit of a hurry here, but let's hope they're right. And if they're not, I admit to making mistakes daily, every hour, possibly. maybe more than that. If you see a mistake because I'm going too fast on these, and you know my eyes aren't that good anyway, let me know. All right, now go back to the video. Let's see, we're on number 4, video 3, and get out your GDP deflator notes. I went back and looked at a bunch of problems to see about if I could find one of the essays that had a GDP deflator in it. Okay. All right. So now let me look at my notes here. Why don't you got all that stuff out in front of you. Why don't you pause the video, write, set out your paper to put your answers here, 3A, B, C, D. Make sure you put BI and BII, and go ahead and figure this out on your own, and then come back and we'll go over it. Okay, we're going over it. It says Gala land produces 3 final goods: bread, water, and fruit. Shows this is hopefully going to be easy because we don't have 2 years like we did the last time. The table shows this year's output and price for each good. Calculate this year's nominal GDP, P times Q. Hope you remember how to do this. Multiply those together, and you should come up for A with $6,000. Good. Now, assume that in Gala land, Google. Okay, Google's going off over here. Assume that in Gala land, the GDP deflator is $100, is 100, not dollars, it's 100. It's an index, remember, and the base year in 150 this year. That means is price level has gone up 50% this year. And so the inflation rate is going to be 50%, went from 100 to 150. Whatever the base year was, it was 100, the index. This year it's 150. So GDP, remember what the GDP deflator does, GDP, real GDP is overstated by 50%. So the inflation rate between whenever the base year was and this year is 50%. And so if this, we got $6,000 in real GDP, if it is 1.5 times what the real GDP is, this year's real GDP would be $4,000. Okay. Now I do math differently in my head. You heard me say how I would do it. It's 150%. But make sure you look at the formula, and remember you're going to have that formula on the test to see how this is done. All right, moving on to C. Since the base year, workers have received a 20% increase in their nominal wages. If the workers face the same inflation that you calculated, which we decided was 50%, what has happened to their real wages? Well, what happened was inflation is 50%. So their money is worth, has gone down 50%, and they got a 20% raise. So they're, so if their money, if inflation is 50% and they got a 20% raise, they are 30% behind. Okay. So what happened to their real wages? It went down. Explain just, and you can say it just like I said it. Inflation was 50%. They only got a 20% raise, so they are 30% behind. And I'll show you in a minute how the College Board would have worded it. If the GDP deflator in Gala land increases unexpectedly, would a borrower with a fixed rate interest rate loan be better or worse off? So borrowers borrow money from a bank. The bank gives them cash or M1, and they're going to be paying it back, right? So let's say the bank thought there was going to be 20% interest rate, 20% inflation rate. They add 20% to the real interest rate, right? Well, it turns out that the inflation is worse than that. So what the borrower is paying back is worth even less than what the bank expected. So is the borrower better off or worse off? The borrower is better off. Okay, and you heard what I said. Let's see how it shakes out in their explanation. Okay, so did we do this right? I think we did. Maybe my explanation is not exactly the way you had explained it. Let's look at the other one. It's looking good here. Anyway, this is the end of video 2 for the day.